Harper Quinn's wrists burned where the coarse rope bit into her skin, and the wind tore at her hair as she dangled above the jagged canyon floor. The sun scorched her back, painting her shoulders a blistering red, while the crowd below leaned eagerly over the wooden railing, their faces twisted in cruel amusement. Every eye seemed to mock her, whispering words she could barely hear over the rush of wind. "She's ours." "The girl will die before sunset," one voice jeered. Harper's stomach lurched, and for the first time, the cruel reality sank in. She had been condemned not for crime, but for the whim of a town that wanted to see her broken. Then he appeared. A shadow detached itself from the cliffs above, moving with a predator's grace. Dakota, the Apache warrior, stepped into the glare of the setting sun, his bare chest rippling with lean, honed muscle. Feathers and beads swung from his long black hair, catching the light as if the sun itself celebrated his arrival. His eyes, dark and intense, locked on Harper's. For a fleeting moment, time seemed to stop. The crowd's jeers faded into silence, replaced by the thudding of Harper's own heartbeat. Dakota's lips curled into the smallest hint of a smile, almost imperceptible, and then he reached up, grasping the rope with a strength that belied his calm demeanor. Harper's pulse raced as he gave a sharp tug. The rope loosened. She gasped, tasting the dust and sweat that filled the dry air. The rope no longer a noose around her wrists, but a lifeline dangling at her mercy. "Hold on," he said, his voice low and steady, like the rumble of distant thunder. Harper barely understood the words through the roar of her racing mind, but she clung to them. Her fingers scraped against the frayed fibers as he guided her down the cliffside. The rock was unforgiving beneath her boots, jagged and uneven, cutting into her palms whenever she lost balance. Dust stung her eyes, making tears well, but the weight of hope, strange and foreign, pulled her forward. Behind them, the townsfolk shouted, anger and disbelief twisting their features. "Stop him!" One man cried, but Dakota moved like the wind, silent, precise, uncatchable. He shielded Harper with his body, each step calculated, every movement a promise of protection. She could feel the heat radiating from him, the rhythm of his muscles, the quiet intensity that marked a life lived on the edge of danger. Harper realized she had never felt this alive or this terrified at the same time. They reached a narrow ledge halfway down the cliff. Harper's knees trembled as she caught her breath, the rope dangling uselessly beside her. Dakota motioned for her to sit, and she obeyed, still trying to comprehend that she was no longer suspended between life and death by a rope, but by the choices of a stranger who had appeared out of nowhere. "You are not alone," he said, voice soft but commanding. Harper wanted to ask who he was, why he had come, why anyone would risk himself for a girl the world had written off. But before the words left her lips, a shrill whistle split the air, the sound of pursuit, of danger close behind. The posse, tipped off or perhaps just relentless in their cruelty, were already racing along the rim of the cliff. Harper's heart thumped against her ribs, the adrenaline making her fingers numb. Dakota's eyes scanned the ledge and then the canyon below. He pointed to a narrow path winding along the cliffside, almost invisible from the town above. "We move now," he said. Harper nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. The rope swung lazily, brushing against her legs as she followed him, step by precarious step, along the perilous edge. Dust and loose stones slid beneath their boots, forcing her to clutch the canyon wall with raw, aching fingers. Every misstep could mean a fall into the yawning chasm below, a death far more certain than the gallows. Halfway along the path, Harper stole a glance at Dakota. His gaze never wavered, every motion controlled, calm, and sure. For the first time in her life, Harper felt the strange mixture of fear and trust, fear of the world outside, trust in the man guiding her through it. She realized that whatever lay ahead, she could not face it alone. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a small spark of hope ignited, a hope she hadn't felt in years. Harper Quinn had survived the rope, survived the jeers, survived the desert's merciless sun. But this was only the beginning. The world below might have watched her die. But with Dakota by her side, she might just find a way to live. The desert sun beat down relentlessly as Harper Quinn followed Dakota through the skeletal remains of a long-abandoned mining town. Wooden storefronts sagged at odd angles, broken windows reflecting the harsh light like fractured mirrors. The wind whistled through empty buildings, carrying with it the faint metallic scent of rust and old smoke. Harper's boots crunched against sand and shattered boards, every step echoing across the hollow street dot behind them. A trail of dust hinted that their pursuers were closer than Harper dared to imagine. She stole a glance at Dakota, who moved with the calm precision of a predator. Muscles tensed, eyes scanning every shadow, fingers brushing against the hilt of a hidden knife. His long black hair, tied loosely with leather and beads, fluttered in the desert wind. Each step he took seemed effortless, yet it was filled with silent power, a man who had survived countless dangers. Harper's chest tightened with a mix of fear and awe. "This place," Harper whispered, voice trembling. "It's empty." Dakota didn't answer immediately. Instead, he crouched by a collapsed water tower, examining the surrounding rubble. Harper noticed the faint carvings in the wooden beam symbol she didn't understand, but which seemed to communicate warnings. Dakota's fingers traced the marks lightly, and he muttered a word in his language, a soft hum that vibrated against the dry air. Harper shivered, realizing this man had history here, knowledge the town could never hope to touch. Suddenly, the sharp snap of a branch made her jump. Dust erupted behind a row of fallen wagons as three masked men appeared, rifles raised. Harper froze, terror gripping her like a vice. Dakota stepped forward without hesitation, bare feet gripping the rough boards, muscles coiling as if ready to spring. His dark eyes met hers for a brief second, and Harper felt an unspoken command. "Trust me." Survive. In a blur, Dakota moved. One man tried to fire, but an arrow streaked past, embedding itself in the wooden beam above him. Harper barely had time to duck as Dakota disarmed another attacker, a whip of motion that left her breathless. The third man turned to flee, but Dakota grabbed a rope dangling from a nearby balcony and swung, tackling him to the ground. Harper stumbled back, heart pounding, witnessing a level of skill and strength she had never imagined. After the skirmish, silence fell like a heavy blanket. Harper's hand shook, sweat and dust coating her skin. Dakota turned to her, expression unreadable, yet soft at the edges. "Are you hurt?" he asked, voice calm but insistent. Harper shook her head. I think not, but they'll come back, won't they?" Dakota's jaw tightened. "They always do. But so long as we move and stay unseen, they will not catch us." He gestured toward a narrow alleyway between two collapsed buildings. "Follow me. There is a path out of this town that leads to the canyon. It is dangerous, but it is the only way." As they ran, Harper's mind raced. Every shadow seemed alive, every creaking floorboard a signal of danger. Yet for the first time in days, she felt a strange rush of exhilaration. She wasn't just running. She was fighting for her life, guided by a man whose presence made the impossible seem possible. They emerged at the edge of the town where a rickety wooden bridge spanned a dry wash. Harper hesitated, eyeing the crumbling planks. Dakota offered a reassuring nod, and she placed her foot carefully, following him step by step. Below, the canyon floor stretched wide and barren, a tapestry of red earth and scattered boulders. The wind howled, whipping her hair across her face. Halfway across, Dakota stopped, eyes narrowing. "Listen," he whispered. Harper held her breath, hearing the faint echo of hoofbeats, another group closing in fast. Dakota's expression hardened. Run fast. Jump if you must. I will cover you. Harper nodded, adrenaline flooding her veins. She sprinted across the last few planks, landing on the canyon floor with a jolt. Dust rose around her boots as she scrambled up the slope, lungs burning. Dakota followed, leaping with the grace of a panther, landing beside her with a calm that defied the chaos around them. For the first time, Harper allowed herself a fleeting smile. She had survived the noose, the jeers, and now the chase through the ghost town. Yet as she glanced back toward the horizon, where the desert sun blazed mercilessly, she knew this was only the beginning. Out here with Dakota, survival demanded courage, cunning, and the willingness to trust a man whose world she could barely comprehend. The canyon stretched ahead, wild and unforgiving, but Harper felt a spark inside her that refused to die. She wasn't just running anymore, she was alive, and perhaps, for the first time, free. Night had fallen over the desert, and the canyon stretched before Harper Quinn like a dark labyrinth. Silver moonlight glimmered off the winding creek that carved its way through jagged cliffs, turning the water into a ribbon of liquid light. Crickets and unseen creatures chirped and skittered among the rocks, while the wind carried whispers through the canyon walls that sounded almost human. Harper's muscles ached from the escape through the ghost town, but exhaustion was secondary to the fear of what might be waiting for them in the shadows. Dakota moved ahead with fluid confidence, bare feet silent against the uneven stone. Moonlight caught the beads and feathers in his long black hair, glinting like tiny stars. His chest rose and fell steadily, every movement controlled, precise, a predator perfectly attuned to his environment. Harper followed as best she could, her hands scraping along the canyon wall for balance, dust and sand grinding beneath her nails. The roar of the desert at night was both terrifying and oddly comforting. She was alive, and that was more than she had been yesterday. This canyon? It's alive, Harper whispered, her voice trembling. Dakota glanced back at her, the corners of his mouth just hinting at a smile. It listens, it hides, it teaches. Stay close. His voice was low, a smooth vibration that seemed to settle the fear in Harper's chest. She realized that every word he spoke carried weight, experience honed over years of survival in a world that had shown him no mercy. They rounded a bend where the creek widened into a shallow pool, reflecting the moon like a silver mirror. Dakota knelt and touched the water with one hand, sending ripples across the surface. Harper crouched beside him, staring at the dark reflections of their faces. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, voice barely more than a whisper. Dakota's gaze did not waver. "Because some things must be protected, even when the world does not care. You are alive for a reason, Harper Quinn. That is enough for me." Harper swallowed hard, the raw sincerity in his voice cutting through the fear and confusion she had carried for days. She had never imagined someone would risk themselves for her, not in a town that had watched her die without a thought. Yet here he was, guiding her through the night, every step a promise that she could survive. Suddenly, the rustle of wings drew their attention upward. A pair of owls circled overhead, their cries echoing against the canyon walls. Harper shivered, feeling the weight of the night pressing down on her. Dakota scanned the cliffs with sharp eyes, every muscle taut. He motioned silently toward a narrow alcove just ahead, hidden behind hanging vines and shadows. "We hide here for a while. They may follow, but this place, it protects." Inside the alcove, Harper could hear the faint rush of the creek, the whisper of wind threading through the rocks. Dakota crouched beside her, brushing dust from her torn sleeve. His touch was brief but deliberate, a silent reassurance that she was not alone. Harper's heart pounded not from fear, but from the intensity of being seen, truly seen, by someone who did not judge her or mock her weaknesses. As she leaned back against the cool stone, Harper noticed intricate carvings etched into the canyon. Wall symbols and images of animals, warriors, and spirits she did not understand. Dakota traced them with his fingers, whispering words in his language. Harper felt a strange chill, as though the canyon itself were speaking to her, revealing stories older than any town or trial she had known. Hours passed in tense silence. Harper watched the moon shift across the sky, feeling the strange mix of fear, awe, and hope grow within her. Dakota had taught her a lesson she hadn't realized she needed. Survival was not just physical. It was learning to trust, to observe, to respect the world's dangers and the rare people willing to shield her from them. Finally, Dakota rose, stretching his long, powerful frame. We move before dawn. There is a place beyond the Findajinti on the Biopolitimanatara Canyon, where we will be safe for a while. Harper nodded, understanding that the night had changed her. She was no longer a helpless girl fleeing the hangman's rope. She was alive, guided by a man who had faced death more times than she could imagine, and somehow he had chosen to protect her. The canyon whispered around them as they slipped deeper into its shadows, carrying their footsteps like secrets. And Harper Quinn felt a flicker of something she had almost forgotten: hope. The early morning sun blazed over the desert, painting the horizon in shades of gold and crimson. Harper Quinn's throat felt raw from the dry wind as she followed Dakota along a narrow ridge overlooking the railroad tracks. Below, the rhythmic clatter of a train echoed across the valley, the wheels sparking against iron rails as the engine chugged steadily eastward. Harper's heart raced, not just from exhaustion, but from the unfamiliar thrill of watching the world move while she remained hunted. This train? It's moving fast, Harper whispered, squinting against the glare. Dakota's dark eyes scanned the distant landscape, muscles coiled beneath his bare chest. It carries more than metal and coal, he said softly. Danger rides with it. As they crested the ridge, Harper saw them. 3 figures leaping from the moving train, rifles swinging, their movements sharp and practiced. Harper froze. The wind caught in her hair, dust swirling around her boots. She felt the weight of fear settle deep in her chest. Dakota didn't hesitate. With the agility of a panther, he sprinted down the rocky slope, boots kicking up dust and small stones. He reached Harper's side, his hand brushing against hers for a fleeting moment. "Stay low, stay close," he ordered, voice calm but commanding. Harper nodded, pressing herself against a boulder as arrows whistled past. Clanging against the rocks, the bandits charged toward them, their rifles ready. Harper's pulse thundered in her ears, but her eyes stayed on Dakota. He moved like a force of nature, every motion precise, every muscle engaged. One bandit lunged toward her, but Dakota intercepted him effortlessly, twisting the man's arm and sending him sprawling into the dust. Another tried to flank them, only to find Dakota already there, disarming him with a fluid motion that left Harper's jaw slack in the chaos. Harper realized something remarkable. She was not entirely helpless. Following Dakota's movements, she ducked and rolled behind crates, picking up small stones and tossing them to create distractions. Her hands trembled, but she began to anticipate the bandits' motions, matching her instincts to Dakota's teachings. The fear that had defined her life for so long was giving way to something sharper: focus, awareness, and the faintest spark of courage. Suddenly, the lead bandit, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, raised his rifle. Time seemed to slow. Harper's eyes widened as the gun's barrel glinted in the sunlight. Dakota sprang forward, muscles rippling, tackling the man to the ground with the ease of someone who had spent a lifetime mastering survival. Harper gasped, her pulse racing, watching the warrior she had come to trust move with almost supernatural precision. When the last bandit finally fled toward the tracks, Dakota grabbed Harper's hand and pulled her back to the ridge. Dust swirled around their boots as they paused, chests heaving, the distant train whistle fading into the canyon. Harper felt her entire body trembling, not from exhaustion, but from the adrenaline that had surged and lingered long after the danger had passed. "You," Harper began, her voice trembling, "you're incredible." Dakota's dark eyes met hers, expression unreadable yet calm. Survival is not just skill. It is observation, timing, and knowing when to act. You have done well to stay alive. Harper Quinn, that is what matters. Harper swallowed hard, watching him clean the dust and sweat from his hands with a small scrap of cloth. His presence was commanding, protective, and quietly terrifying all at once. For the first time, she understood that her life was no longer solely hers. She was part of a story bigger than she could comprehend. Guided by a man who lived on the edge of danger every day. As the sun climbed higher, Harper and Dakota continued their journey along the ridge, leaving the train and its attackers far behind. The desert stretched endlessly before them, a harsh and unforgiving world, yet somehow Harper felt a small flicker of hope ignite inside her chest. She was still hunted, still fragile, yet alive, and with Dakota at her side, she felt the faintest certainty that she could survive whatever the West threw at her next. The canyon below whispered in the morning wind, carrying with it the promise of more danger, more tests, and the growing realization that Harper Quinn was no longer just a girl fleeing death. She was becoming a force capable of facing it head-on. The relentless desert stretched endlessly before Harper Quinn, the sun a brutal orb scorching the earth, yet Dakota moved as if he belonged to the wilderness itself. Harper's feet were raw from the rocky terrain, dust and grit caking her skin. But she followed him without hesitation. Each step along the canyon paths and dry washes was a mix of fear, trust, and curiosity. She had never encountered a man like him, whose very presence seemed to command both respect and awe. After hours of careful navigation, Dakota paused atop a cliff overlooking a narrow valley. Harper's eyes widened at the sight below, a hidden oasis shielded from the sun and eyes of the world. A crystal-clear stream snaked through lush greenery, wildflowers clinging stubbornly to the rocky soil, and small birds flitted among the trees, their song soft but melodious in the quiet of the desert. Waterfalls trickled down smooth stone faces, their sound a gentle contrast to the harsh wind of the surrounding canyon. Harper pressed her hands to her mouth in disbelief. I didn't think places like this existed out here." Dakota's dark eyes glinted in the sunlight as he descended with effortless grace, bare feet gripping the rocks like he was part of the landscape itself. His long black hair fell across his shoulders, beads and feathers catching the light. Harper followed, careful not to slip, her fear of the unknown tempered by the sense of safety he radiated. When they reached the water, Dakota knelt and cupped the cool stream in his hands. Harper bent down beside him, feeling the chill seep into her parched skin. She drank slowly, savoring the taste of water so pure it felt like life itself. This is incredible," she whispered. Dakota studied her quietly, his expression calm but intense. "Few know this place. It is hidden for a reason." He gestured toward the alcoves and cliffs surrounding the oasis. "Here one can rest, plan, and survive. It belongs to no town, no law, and certainly no one who wishes to harm the innocent." Harper's gaze swept over the oasis. The realization hit her like a wave. This man, Dakota, had survived alone in a world that had long rejected him, and he had chosen to share this sanctuary with her. "Why me?" she asked, voice soft. "Why risk yourself to save a girl no one else would care about?" Dakota's dark eyes softened, but his jaw remained firm. Because some things are worth protecting, and because true courage can appear in the most unlikely of hearts. You survived when others would have faltered, Harper Quinn. That alone earns my respect. Harper swallowed, a lump rising in her throat. Never before had she felt such a mixture of vulnerability and strength. Here, at this oasis, she was neither hunted nor helpless. The desert, so cruel and relentless just moments ago, now felt alive with possibility. As she explored the oasis, Harper noticed hidden alcoves. Behind the waterfalls, natural ledges high above the water where one could see the canyon below. Dakota guided her silently, demonstrating the paths and safe zones, teaching her to read the land. Harper's fear slowly transformed into cautious confidence. She was learning, bit by bit, how to survive not just by hiding, but by understanding. By observing, and by trusting Dakota's guidance. Hours passed with the sun beginning its descent behind the cliffs. Harper lay near the water, watching Dakota clean a small wound on his arm. Despite his bare-chested appearance and imposing figure, there was a gentleness in the way he handled each task. Harper realized that survival was not just physical. It was knowledge, instinct, and the ability to connect with the world and the people willing to protect you. Finally, Dakota stood, scanning the horizon. We must leave before nightfall. Others may be searching, but remember this place. It is your reminder that life, even in the harshest places, can hold beauty and refuge. Harper nodded, feeling the weight of his words. She had escaped death, endured danger, and survived the desert with a man whose presence was as commanding as it was protective. And now, she had seen a glimpse of hope, a secret world hidden away from cruelty and fear. As they prepared to leave the oasis, Harper's chest swelled with a strange new feeling, determination. She would survive. She would learn. And perhaps, for the first time, she might even thrive. The oasis whispered behind them, a promise of life in a world that had seemed intent on her destruction. With Dakota at her side, Harper Quinn felt, for the first time, that survival was only the beginning. The crimson sun bathed Red Mesa in an otherworldly glow, turning the jagged cliffs into towering walls of fire. Harper Quinn's heart pounded in her chest as she followed Dakota along a narrow ridge overlooking the valley below. The townsfolk who had once jeered at her now stood assembled, rifles and pistols in hand, their faces twisted with anger and disbelief. Harper's hand shook, but she drew in a deep, steadying breath. This was the moment she had dreaded, and yet, for the first time, she felt ready. Dakota crouched beside her, muscles taut beneath his bare chest, long black hair braided with beads and feathers swaying in the wind. His eyes scanned the approaching crowd, dark and unyielding, exuding a presence so commanding that even the most confident men faltered under his gaze. Harper marveled at his control, the way he moved with both grace and precision, every step calculated, every muscle poised for action. "They won't expect this," he murmured, his voice low but firm. "Stay behind me. Watch, learn, and be ready to move when I say." Harper nodded, pressing herself against the red sandstone cliff. Her fingers dug into the coarse rock, and she felt the warmth of the sun-baked stone seep through her skin. The wind carried the scent of sage and dust, mingling with the sharp metallic tang of gunpowder. Her pulse raced, but she forced herself to focus. She wasn't a helpless girl anymore. She was part of this fight, part of the story. As the first rifle shots cracked through the air, Dakota sprang into action. Dust exploded around his feet as he sprinted toward the nearest man, dodging bullets with fluid agility. Arrows and stones flew, and Harper ducked instinctively, heart hammering. Dakota's movements were a blur. Each punch, each strike, each precise motion disarmed or incapacitated a man in seconds. He was not just powerful. He was poetry in motion, a force of nature that refused to be stopped. Harper watched, inspired and terrified, as Dakota deflected a pistol with his forearm and grabbed a rifle from one of the men, using it to knock another off balance. She realized in that moment that his strength wasn't just physical, it was tactical, honed by years of surviving a world that demanded perfection. A tall man with a scarred face raised his gun, aiming directly at Harper. Instinctively, she froze, but Dakota's dark eyes met hers, and a single, sharp gesture told her to move. She rolled behind a boulder, barely escaping the bullet that tore through the air where she had been standing. Dakota lunged at the man, knocking him to the ground and disarming him with precise control. Harper's chest heaved as she watched him work, her fear giving way to awe and something deeper, trust. The standoff continued, bullets and arrows flying, dust and blood mingling with the wind. Harper realized that Dakota's presence had changed everything. He had untied her from the noose, guided her through danger, and now stood as the shield between her and death. Yet even as she clung to him for protection, she felt a flicker of courage ignite. She had learned, bit by bit, to anticipate the threats, to move with purpose, to survive by nightfall. The field was littered with the exhausted and defeated townsfolk. Dakota stood atop a rise, chest heaving, his long black hair catching the last rays of the sun. Harper emerged from behind a boulder, brushing dust from her torn clothes, her eyes wide but determined. The people who had once mocked her now knew that she was no longer a victim. Dakota approached, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You have done well," he said softly. "You are stronger than you know, Harper Quinn. Remember this, your life is yours, and no one can take that from you." Harper looked at him, her pulse finally beginning to slow. The canyon was quiet now, the wind carrying only the whispers of rocks and distant birds. She had survived the hangman's rope, the desert, the ghost town, and now the fury of an entire town. And standing beside her, Dakota's unwavering presence reminded her that survival was no longer about fear, it was about courage, skill, and the rare trust between two people who refused to give up on each other. As darkness fell over Red Mesa, Harper Quinn felt a spark of something she hadn't dared feel in years, hope. The West was harsh and unforgiving, but she had faced it, and with Dakota at her side, she knew she could face anything yet to come. The wind howled across Sunset Ridge, carrying with it the scent of dust, sage, and distant smoke. Harper Quinn's chest heaved as she climbed the rocky incline beside Dakota, the sun dipping low on the horizon, painting the cliffs in shades of fire and gold. The townsfolk who had hunted her for weeks were in pursuit again, their shouts echoing through the canyon like the growl of predators. Yet for the first time, Harper felt neither panic nor despair. She had Dakota beside her, and she had learned to survive. "Stay close," Dakota said, muscles rippling beneath his bare chest, long black hair braided with beads and feathers fluttering in the wind. His eyes, dark and unwavering, scanned the ridge with the precision of a seasoned warrior. Harper adjusted her footing, gripping the jagged rocks, every sense alert. The canyon below stretched endlessly, a labyrinth of shadows and cliffs, but Dakota moved as if he knew every inch by heart. They reached a narrow ledge overlooking a deep chasm, the last natural barrier between them and the approaching posse. Harper's stomach knotted at the height, but Dakota's hand brushed hers briefly, a silent assurance. "We finish this," he said, voice low, steady. "Together." The townsfolk emerged onto the ridge, their rifles aimed, faces twisted with anger and disbelief. Harper's eyes darted between them, and for a heartbeat, the old fear surged back, but Dakota stepped forward. Every muscle coiled, body a living shield of strength and confidence. With a sudden roar, he charged, the sound echoing across the canyon. Harper instinctively followed, ducking behind rocks, throwing sand and stones to distract their attackers. Bullets tore through the air, but Dakota moved with impossible agility, deflecting, dodging, and striking. One man aimed directly at Harper, but Dakota's swift movement sent him sprawling to the ground. Harper's pulse thundered in her ears, but she held her ground, ready to follow his lead. The fight reached the edge of the ridge, where a narrow plank of rock jutted out over the chasm. Dakota's eyes locked with Harper's. "Jump with me," he commanded. Without hesitation, she leapt, landing on the next ledge with a jolt. The townsfolk froze, momentarily stunned by the daring escape, giving Harper and Dakota the precious seconds they needed. From their new vantage, Harper could see the entire canyon stretched below them, a tapestry of reds and golds under the fading sun. Dakota's dark eyes scanned the horizon. "This ends now," he said, voice like thunder. He launched himself at the nearest remaining attackers, muscles taut and sinews visible, moving with the strength and grace of a man who had survived a lifetime of danger. Harper followed, using the lessons he had taught her: timing, observation, and the courage to act even when fear clawed. At her hard dot in a flurry of motion, Dakota disarmed the last man, pinning him to the ground with one powerful hand. Harper approached cautiously, heart still pounding, and realized that they had survived not just by luck, but by skill, trust, and the unbreakable bond forged in the desert, the ghost town, the hidden oasis, and Red Mesa Dot as the sun finally slipped behind the cliffs, bathing the canyon in twilight. Harper Quinn felt a surge of something she hadn't dared feel for years: triumph. They had faced death, cruelty, and relentless pursuit, and they had won. Dakota stood beside her, chest heaving, the warm glow of the sunset highlighting the beads and feathers in his hair, his bare skin gleaming with sweat and dust. Harper looked up at him, awe and gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. Dakota's dark eyes softened, and for the first time, Harper saw a hint of a smile. "You have survived because you dared, Harper Quinn. You fought with me, and more importantly, you fought for yourself. Never forget that." The wind carried their words across the canyon, mixing with the fading echoes of the battle. Harper felt the weight of the past weeks lift from her shoulders. The rope, the jeers, the desert, the ghost town, they were all behind her now. She had faced the unforgiving West and emerged stronger, braver, and alive. As twilight deepened, Harper and Dakota stood atop Sunset Ridge, looking out over the canyon. The world was vast, harsh, and unpredictable, but for the first time, Harper Quinn felt ready to face it. With Dakota by her side, the desert no longer seemed like a prison. It was a place of survival, of courage, and, perhaps most importantly, of hope. The West was theirs to navigate, and Harper knew that whatever came next, she would never face it alone.